Hello everyone, this is the first podcast episode of the Totally Biased Indian, and today we are talking about air pollution with Dr. Srikath Sola. Dr. Srikath Sola is the CEO and founder of Devic Earth, which is a Bangalore-based green tech company which has created some really awesome products to mitigate the problem of air pollution. Dr. Sola is a cardiologist by profession and has completed his medical science education from the University of Louisville, Harvard Medical School, Duke University, and Emory University. He's also a former cardiologist at Cleveland Clinic, which is widely reputed as one of the top institutions for heart care in the world. Dr. Sola is also recipient of numerous awards and has been named Who's Who in America, Who's Who in Science and Engineering, and one of America's best cardiologists by Consumer Research Council. He has authored 50 research publications in peer-reviewed journals and numerous book chapters, and serves on the editorial board of several international research journals in cardiology. Hi, Dr. Srikanth. Thank you for accepting to do this podcast with the Totally Biased Indian. We are really excited to have you to talk about the Pure Skies product that you have created and how it can basically manage and mitigate the problem of air pollution. We really want to create awareness with the air pollution series, and we are really excited to have you as our first guest. Thank you for joining in.
Thanks, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Srikanth, the first question I want to ask you is, what is your perception about the problem of air pollution in India? I ask you this since you're from the medical science background and you're a cardiologist, and you've done your education from one of the topmost universities in the world for medical science, like the Louisville University, Duke University, Emory University, and Stanford University. And also you worked as a cardiologist with Cleveland Clinic. And for 10 years, after coming back to India, you researched on the issue of air pollution. So what is your perception about the problem of air pollution in India?
Sure. So, I grew up in the United States, and when we came to India in 2008, things weren't as bad with air pollution as they were now. But there was a situation that really got me started and really brought the issue of air pollution to right in front of me, literally. When we're in training as a doctor, we're taught about air pollution, how it affects the body, how it affects the heart, and so forth. And when I had landed in India, and I joined the Srikath Sola Institute of Higher Medical Sciences in Bangalore. It's a well-known charitable hospital. State-of-the-art care is delivered for free. In America, we have this saying when Indians move to the US, we call them FOBs, which means fresh off the boat, because they've just landed and they're still figuring things out. So I was an FOB, but from an Indian from America who had come to India. And so in that first FOB week, I had a young guy who was just 28 years of age. He was did shoe repairs. Those guys who have those little stalls, they repair sandals and so forth. Yes, cobblers, exactly. And he had a heart attack because of air pollution. And I couldn't believe it. It was the first time I had seen it. I had read about it all the time, but now here was a young man. He had a wife and a young child, and he had a huge heart attack. And we brought him into our cardiac catheterization laboratory. We did the emergency angioplasty. We opened the blocked artery, and he did great. He walked out of the hospital a few days later, fully recovered. And I was feeling so proud of myself. The FOB American cardiologist coming into India, I was feeling so great. But then a few days later, 2 days later to be exact, another gentleman, 30 years of age, he's a taxi driver, exact same story. He's got his windows rolled down when he's not having passengers, and he's breathing in vehicle fumes all day. He came in with a heart attack from the same thing. None of the usual risk factors like diabetes, high blood pressure, smoking, none of those things, but just breathing air pollution all day long. We did his angioplasty operation, and he died right in front of me on the table. And there is nothing I could do. We tried our best. And afterwards, I had to go and explain to his wife. His young son was there, and his parents were there. And I had to explain that we tried everything that we could, but unfortunately, we couldn't save him. And that really brought it home to me. You see, I'm sure that many of our listeners will have heard the numbers that air pollution kills 7 million people every year. That's several times more that have died from, say, the coronavirus pandemic, which is also, of course, a major issue, not to downplay that. But the problem with air pollution is endemic in society across the world. world. 91% of people breathe polluted air or air that's not fit to breathe. But this was the human side of it. On the one hand, I was seeing a guy who was lucky. He survived his operation. He survived his heart attack and he had a successful operation. But on the other side, I was seeing someone who didn't make it despite the best of medical care. And that really brought it home to me. And that's the human face. It's not just the numbers. It's the fact that this man's family went home without a father, without a husband or a son. And that really hit home that this is a real issue that is affecting literally hundreds of thousands of Indians or millions of Indians on a daily basis.
Sir, I was not aware that heart attacks and heart related issues can be aggravated by air pollution. Could you elaborate more on that?
Sure, sure. So a lot of people know that air pollution is bad for the lungs, but it turns out that air pollution affects pretty much every part of the body, unfortunately. You see, air pollution is made up of many different types of pollutants. There's gases that come out, the stinky stuff that comes out of diesel cars or big trucks, that black soot that comes out. But then there's also these microscopic particles, particles that are too small to be seen by
Yeah.
the naked eye. We call them particulate matter because they're particles, PM, and we grade them on their size. So PM10 is, for example, are pollution particles that are 10 microns in size. PM2.5 is 2.5 microns in size. In comparison to everyday things that we see, that means that a PM2.5 particle is 40 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. So it's very teeny tiny, yes. So these small particles, when we inhale them, what they go all the way down to our lungs. The big particles will get filtered out, usually in the nose and the upper respiratory system, and the small airway, the hairs that line the upper respiratory system. They do a good job of filtering out the big stuff. But it's the smaller particles that go all the way into the lungs, and there they get absorbed into the bloodstream, and then they just play havoc. It's like Baby Yoda in The Mandalorian, when he's got baby eggs to eat, frog eggs to eat, he just goes crazy. They just go everywhere, and they affect every part of the body, whether it's the reproductive system, where it causes infertility or premature birth, whether it's the brain, where it causes stroke and dementia, Alzheimer's, the heart, where it goes into the arteries and actually creates what we call inflammation, which is like the smoke from a fire, and that irritates the lining of those arteries, which can lead to blockages and other problems. Yes. And that's exactly how those heart attacks go. Now, if you already have heart disease or lung disease, then it just makes things worse. Your heart disease or lung diseases will get much better. India, interestingly, is the diabetes capital of the world. And there's a very strong link between air pollution and diabetes as well. And that's because that same inflammation that takes place in the heart affects the pancreas and creates diabetes. So we see it on a day-to-day basis. It affects all of us, whether we're aware of it or not.
Yeah. So when we talk about air pollution, most people think that it's just the lungs that gets affected, but in reality, it's
Right.
affecting the entire body.
Your
And
entire
since
body.
I'm an
Yes.
asthmatic myself, I tend to breathe more through my mouth than through my nose. So the air is not getting filtered also properly through those tiny hairs that we have in our nose.
Right, right. Of course, once even there are some filtration systems, natural systems further down in the respiratory system, but once those teeny tiny particles, the PM10 and 2.5, get into the lungs, then it's game over. They've gotten into the body and they will take their effect. Now, there are some things that you can do. You can exercise, and maybe we can discuss that a little bit later. You can keep yourself healthy. You can eat a diet that's high in antioxidants. So that would be a lot of fresh fruits, a lot of fresh vegetables. There are several studies that show that people who consume a Mediterranean diet, which is basically what I've just described, a diet high in fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, less refined oils, that's better. And that keeps the antioxidant damage from these pollution particles down. It doesn't prevent it, of course, but apart from breathing clean air when that clean air is not available, you can make sure that you can try to reduce it to some degree.
So you kind of spoke about this already. You were working with Cleveland Clinic for 3 years, and then you moved to India in 2008. and joined Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Medical Sciences. So
Hmm.
you had this plan to move to India already in place, or you wanted to do something about the air pollution problem, and
Hmm.
that's why you moved to India. So I want to know what was the real motivation behind, you know.
Sure, sure. That's a great question. I was very happy. In my case, how here in India you see that parents have grown up, they're elder, and their kids have gone abroad, and they're in the U.S. or other countries, and the parents are waiting for the child to come back. And in our case, it's different. My parents and family are abroad, and I'm the one who came back to India, and so I have to go back to the U.S. to see my parents. But they're wonderful and they're very supportive. And because of them and their upbringing, I was very successful. I was a gold medalist at the national level in high school, in medical school, had won all sorts of awards, who's who in engineering, who's who in science, and so forth, who's who in America, and was named one of America's top cardiologists by a consumers group 2 years in a row. I had done a lot of biomedical engineering work at the Cleveland Clinic, and even when I was involved in clinical trials at Emory University, where we were actually looking at new ways to create technologies that would improve heart function, new types of heart valves that could be placed using essentially what is now microsurgery into the body without having to make major surgery that would have its risk associated with it. And, I'm proud to say that those devices that I helped work on in those early days, those are now in use in hundreds of thousands of patients around the world every day, every year rather. And so I understood. I had a chance to work with big companies like GE Healthcare, Siemens, Philips, Medtronic, St. Jude's, and so forth, and had research projects with them and was doing well. But what was missing was that we were spending literally millions of dollars, huge amounts of resources to take care of patients at the end of their life, elderly patients who would come to us. And they're just as important. They're, your mother and father, my grandmother and grandfather, they're very crucial to us. But what was missing was that the younger patients,
Mhm.
they weren't getting that state of the art care. I was seeing that, and I especially saw it in India. And that's what brought me back here. I wanted to come back and to serve the country and really make a difference to the lives of people who could benefit from this. And, it's really something when you do a procedure. Let's say a kid comes in with a hole in a heart, and we do a procedure to close that hole. And then the parent asks you, doctor, can my son ride a cycle again? Can he play with his kids in school? And we say, ma'am, your son is completely healed. He can have a normal life. And the joy on the parents' faces, that's just priceless.
Yeah, youngsters who have such medical issues, they tend to miss out on a lot of opportunities. I'm an asthmatic, so I was basically asked not to participate in sports. But I went completely against it. I was participating
Hmm.
in both school as well as college sports and was part of basketball teams and all.
And those are important, right? Those are important. We should all be able to do those things. We should be able to run and play. We should be healthy because that's part of a full life, a fulfilling life.
Exactly, exactly. So, sir, how has your journey been as an entrepreneur in India? Uh, the research started in 2008, and the company Devic Earth was incorporated in 2018. So there was 10 years of research for this product. So, like, how was your journey during this period?
Right. I think we were quite lucky in the beginning. I was able, with my experience, I was able to put together a team of informal team of engineers, physicists, scientists, and others from different institutions. And although most of the work was done by myself and the team that I had put together, we had a lot of input. Scientific and technical input from others who just wanted to see this project succeed. And to be honest, we tried a lot of different technologies. And while some were positive in the beginning, some of them weren't really working outdoors. See, there's a lot of great things like air purifiers that can clean a small room. But what I was interested in was that taxi driver who died. How do we improve air quality for the millions of people who are working outside? We all go outside every day, hopefully. And how do we improve air quality for the kids playing cricket or for the mothers going for a walk with their child outdoors. I was looking for technology that could improve air quality over large areas. And actually, the inspiration came from MRI. I'm a cardiologist and I do a lot of cardiac MRI, that is MRI scans of the heart. And MRI is basically pulsed radio waves in specific sequences. We call them pulse sequences. So you're sending radio pulses in a very specific order to generate or to certain effects on protons in the body. And that's wonderful. And the designers of that, the inventors of that, won the Nobel Prize for their discovery. Looking at that, I thought, can we also use these pulse radio waves for different purposes? We are already using them in MRI. We're using them in treatment of certain heart rhythm problems. We're using them to destroy certain cancers in the body. And we know that radio waves can travel long distances, right? I mean, that's how our TV waves, our TV stations, our satellite, they can travel far distances. Our radios, our cell phones, of course, they travel many, many kilometers to reach us. And so I thought this might be something. And that's what we did. And we were quite successful from the beginning. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was good fortune. Maybe it was a skill or divine grace or a combination of all these.
Yeah.
But we got funding from the Ministry of Environment and Forest, as well as a number of other NGOs, both based here in the United States and in both in the United States and here in India. And we're able to develop a technology that worked reproducibly. We took a long time to understand how it worked. And to be honest, we still have a lot more work to do. We have a lot more work to do in developing the scientific background of this. But I'm pleased to say we have 4 manuscripts that we have submitted to peer-reviewed journals on this, and we're looking forward to those being publicly available soon. But the work was very successful. And the ringer, I'm a cardiologist working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, but I had a team of people working for me. Luckily, I was at a charitable hospital where there was a lot of support for work that would improve public health. The basic idea was that if you can make patients better or even keep them from coming into the hospital, from falling sick in the first place, then that's great. And I didn't have the financial pressures of, what you might see in a private hospital where if you don't, you know how it is. So I didn't have that, fortunately. And that allowed me to develop this work. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But the ringer was when we started to see at Sathya Sai Hospital, looking at people who were living in a 10-kilometer radius from that hospital on the days when our system was on and air pollution was lower, we had fewer patients in our OPD. Specifically, the number of people coming in with to the emergency room with heart attacks or to asthma exacerbations or flares, even blood clots to the lungs or strokes, those numbers came down compared to the days that were the system was not on. And that was really compelling. This meant that we could not only improve air pollution, but we could also improve health. And that was the impetus that started our company, Devic Earth, where it's not about making $1 million. It's about saving millions of lives. And that's what we focus on.
When I read about the technology, I was really amazed because most of the solutions that we have basically work in a closed environment like air purifiers. But since your technology uses radio waves, it can reduce air pollution in an open environment, in an open space, depending upon the range of the radio waves.
Right. Basically, it's accelerating what happens in the natural environment. So you see, all of us have had this experience, especially during the lockdown, where we didn't go outside or we didn't wash our cars or our two-wheelers for a couple of days. And when we came back, we found a layer of dust on our vehicles. But what happens in that case is that these dust particles that are in the air floating around, they normally they collide with each other. And then because they have increased mass, they settle out of the air onto the ground. And this is a process that the scientists call dry deposition. If it rains or snows, then the moisture, the water particles themselves will wash those particles out of the air. And that's called a wet deposition. That's why the air feels so clean after a rain. But dry deposition accounts for most of the clearance, about 2/3 of the clearance of pollutants from the atmosphere. And what we do is we use these pulse radio waves in a specific manner to simply speed up this process. These dust particles have positive, negative charges, and we create a very weak field around this antenna that allows these dust particles to accelerate their motion and then collide with each other and settle out. Now, the good news, though, is that our technology only affects microscopic particles, PM10 and 2.5. We don't affect every pollutant. If there is a dust storm, for example, or a volcano erupting, we could affect the PM10 and 2.5, but we would not affect the visible dust. So every technology has its own limitations. Also, it takes a while for the effect to start because we're cleaning literally millions and millions of cubic meters of air, and that air is always moving, right? So it takes a few days when it's outdoors, maybe 2 to 3 days, to start seeing an effect in the outdoor setting. But that's okay because we're affecting, again,
The end
something
result,
that
yeah.
people breathe in. Yeah, the end result is very beautiful.
So what I understand is the radio waves basically gives these pollutant particles in the air energy, and they put them in the accelerated state. So these particles, they move around and collide with each other and then basically settle down. Is that is that how it works?
Pretty much, they basically, it takes advantage of the fact that these particles have natural charges in them, plus and negative charges. And just like what happens with pulsed radio waves in an MRI scanner, the positive negative charges are realigned somewhat with those pulses, and then they just gain, just like magnets that you played with in school. They move towards each other or move away from each other. That same thing happens. That's the positive mechanism of action for this. We have a lot of work going on to flesh this out in much more detail, but this is what we understand in a nutshell so far.
Yeah, with so much of research now, Pure Skies basically has 4 variants, right?
Right. So what we do is we have different models for different uses, and the idea is that all of them used pulsed Wi-Fi. Earlier, we were working in other parts of the spectrum at different frequencies, but what we found is that Wi-Fi works very well. It's very accepted by the consumer. 2.4 to 2.5 gigahertz, the World Health Organization has found that Wi-Fi is safe to use when it's used within certain regulatory limits, which of course we abide by and test all of our products for. But it's very simple because with the Wi-Fi network, you can set up what we call a point-to-point network. You would have gone to remember the good old days when we used to go to airports often. We would see Wi-Fi routers, but you would also see these extender units or repeater units in the ceilings with that's all. They have one base station or several base stations and then extender units that go across the entire building to make sure that you have Wi-Fi coverage throughout the entire facility. We do pretty much the same thing with our units, and that's how we're able to cover large areas. Wherever we need to cover and provide clean air, we put either one of our base stations or an extender unit to make sure we cover that area. The difference, though, is that each of our units are able to operate just slightly independently, so that suppose in an office park or an IT park, you might have more polluted air near the main road and relatively cleaner air near the landscaped area or the garden areas of the park. So accordingly, they adjust their output to their local conditions. Each one comes with a separate third-party air quality monitor to tell how good the air is and how effective the machine is. But that feedback comes to us, and then through artificial intelligence programming, we select the specific pulse sequence that's required for that particular location. So it's quite a smart technology built into each box.
So it's more like an integrated network of many Pure Sky systems that together work to reduce the air pollution.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. As large as I think the largest installation we had done was about 7 by 3 kilometers. That's about 21 square kilometers. And we had done another one in Delhi as part of a third-party certification study where we reduced PM 2.5 by 65%, and that was in an area of 13 square kilometers. So yeah, quite a large area.
So when I first read about the product, I was like, there is this unit and it uses radio waves. But then when I was digging deeper and doing more research about the product, I found that it's using artificial intelligence and these learning algorithms, and it's basically capturing all the data and sending this data back to the company. So like, what's the need for this data? How is it optimizing it using this data?
Right. So our entire system is very data driven. There's a saying that in God we trust. everybody else must have data, and we believe the same thing too. So if we're going, and air pollution for the most part is invisible, right? Sometimes you can smell it, sometimes you can see it, especially when it's really bad. But for the most part, we don't know how bad the air quality is. We say, oh, it's really smoggy outside, but that's about it. So you need these machines, these air quality monitors, to tell what exactly are the pollutant levels and which ones are high. And then based on that, that data is fed into our system. And then we select which particular pulse sequence to use based on that. It could vary by, say, PM10 being high or PM2.5 being high. Maybe the humidity is low or the temperature is low. Maybe there is a forest fire or crop burning happening in the upwind areas of that particular installation where that customer is, and we need to make sure that's taken care of. In indoor settings like factories, or even for outdoors in factories, we also ask additional questions like how many people are employed in your factory? How many shifts do you have? If they're doing welding, what kind of welding are they doing? Are they using manganese? Are they using copper? Because that makes a difference in the amount of pollution.
Yeah.
Do you have, what other pollution control systems do you have in place? So we take all of this data into account and we feed that into our system. So it's a very, very intense way, but it's very beautiful because we see that, in indoor settings, we're improving air quality in large factories by 80-90%. Outdoors by about 50 to 60%, which is
So a
phenomenal.
lot of pollution is there in factories and industries. So such a unit, such a technology can basically help the workers there.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, it's very intelligent. And then that way you can specifically target and make the entire system more efficient and reduce the pollution as much as possible.
Exactly, exactly. Now, I want to state here, though, that technology is one great way, but our emphasis will always be on reducing pollution at the source. So if you think of where pollution comes from, there are two sort of general categories. One would be the natural sources of pollution. Those would be things like forest fires, like the forest fires we had in California earlier this year, your dust storms, like what happens in the Middle Eastern countries, and occasionally the volcano explosion and so forth. So those are natural sources of pollution. And then there are the man-made ones, the human-made ones, like vehicle emissions, traffic, resuspension of dust from the roads as vehicles go over them. Burning of open waste, for example, which is quite common, especially in South Asia and Southeast Asia, where because of poor solid waste management practices, many people just put their waste on the ground and set fire to it, regardless of its components, and many other sources, industries, and so forth. And all of these help to make the things that we use on a daily basis. But we will always start with reducing pollution at the source. And even when we go to a customer for commercial installation, one of the first things we do is go around their plant or factory or their site and say, where is your pollution coming from? How can we help you to reduce your pollution first, in addition to what our technology does? Because it makes a huge difference. There's something called industrial hygiene, where we look at, what's your plant setup like? Are your storage materials covered? When you're transporting materials, say in a lorry, are you using dirt roads? Are using asphalt roads? How about steel roads? Are your storage and transportation areas covered? And do you have any type of evacuation system? And I will tell you, please don't buy the Chinese fume extractor systems because they don't work. Buy the more expensive ones because they're the ones that will actually extract those fumes from welding and so forth. So we'll go through this and we'll discuss this with the client, and we'll say, you do all these things, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we'll put our technology in, of course, at the same time. It's always about reducing pollution at the source. That will always be the first and foremost thing to do, whether it's across the city, across the country, or in an individual factory or industry.
So you work on the source of air pollution first, and then the rest of
Yes,
the air pollution is
exactly.
basically taken care by the
Yes,
Pure Sky system. Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to ask you, what are the other measures that we need to take, what India needs to take to basically curb the air pollution problem? A lot of entrepreneurs and companies are working on solutions. So, other than that, like what are the policy decisions, what initiatives we need to take, the what government action needs to be taken to basically handle this
sure.
issue?
Right now, India has some of the worst air pollution in the world. And depending on which year you look at, the more than half of the world's most polluted cities, at least if you say look at the top 20 or top 30 most polluted cities, more than half of them are located in India. It's because of dense population, because of certain geographic factors, especially in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, where pollution tends to accumulate, especially in the winter months, but also just because pollution practices are not optimal. And so what is required is a strong policy initiative supported by laws with real teeth. It's one thing to have a law, but it's another thing if the people enforcing those laws don't have the teeth or the bite, the resources required to actually implement and enforce those laws, whether it's banning solid waste burning or closing down polluted factories for good, or whatever. If you just take a look, for example, let's pick a popular subject right now, such as the coal thermal power plants that are in India. India right now faces a bill of, just for the most polluted plants, of 32,000 crore rupees to upgrade their air pollution control equipment. I'm not talking about pure skies. I'm talking here about the scrubbers and the other high-end equipment that cost millions or billions of dollars to install at each plant. Now, at the same time, India needs to ensure that 100% of its population has 24/7 access to electricity, reliable and high quality electricity. This is a huge cost. Now, it would increase per unit increase on electricity bill to implement this kind of technology is not so much, right? It would hardly be a few paisa per unit of electricity, according to several studies. But the problem is that the individual companies that have to take this kind of capital expenditure expense to do this, it's a lot. And most of them are cash strapped because of various other issues like problems with the discoms, the distributor companies, and so forth. Other people have said, well, 32,000 crore rupees, that's like $7 billion. And India has the lowest cost per megawatt for renewable energy, especially from solar. Why don't we just close down those thermal power plants and build solar plants instead? And then we never have any more pollution, or at least we don't have the air pollution that these thermal plants will continue to emit for years and years. Now, I don't know what the right answer is. Nobody does really, because there is no, as yet, there's no perfect solution, right? Solar and wind plants need a lot of space. They don't create energy 24/7, and you need to store that energy if it's not all used. Where do you store those? Well, we don't have good energy storage solutions on scale as of yet, and the ones that we do use use a lot of rare earth metals. So what's the solution? I don't know, but we definitely need to look at more creative ways of reducing pollution at the source. It starts with policy, but it also starts with awareness. Can we commute less? I think all of us are doing that in the pandemic, but more importantly, can we consume less? Right? Can we consume less? Do we really need all the things that we have filling up our house? Can we live a little bit more simply, a little bit more gently? Can we spend more time with our families instead of with our phones, for example? I think these kind of choices made by the consumer will actually have a much larger, more profound impact
Yeah.
on the quality of life and the air quality
Yeah,
around
such
us.
policies will basically force companies to take decision to basically manage the air pollution
Exactly.
problem.
Exactly.
So, sir, you like to run, you like to go for a jog and all.
I
So,
love to run. Yes.
what is the best time to go for a jog or do exercise when the air quality is so low? And what kind of exercises? What is the best time to
Sure.
basically do exercise?
Sure. So, just like we have the monsoon season, the summer season, spring, and so forth, we also have a pollution season, which in India generally starts around October, typically right from the start of October, especially in the north. But people think that air pollution is in Delhi. Well, no, it's not in Delhi. It's 100% of the country, except for perhaps Andaman and Nicobar. And if you're listening to this from Andaman, well, a big shout out to you. But for the rest of the country, I'm sorry. Your air quality is going to be way higher, several fold higher than what is recommended by the World Health Organization. So it's pretty much the entire country. Even the Himalayas are affected. Now, so from October through about somewhere in Feb, we have our air pollution season, a little bit longer or shorter here based on the local weather patterns. But that means that this is the worst time to be affected by air pollution. And what happens when you exercise? Now, I'm an avid runner, so I know this very well. Anyone who exercises knows this. You're breathing in more, so you're taking in more volume of air with each breath, and typically you're inhaling this through the mouth. So you bypass some of the more coarser filtration systems in the nose, and it goes straight to the lungs. And so this is actually more damaging. And what we find is that elite athletes or endurance athletes or super athletes, like what you might find at the Olympics, they often have mild asthma or they have mild restrictive lung disease because of the effects of air pollution on their lungs, especially those who exercise in the more polluted areas of the world. Now, you can minimize this. There are many apps that you can download onto your phone that tells you about the air quality in your particular area, and you should avoid the most polluted times, which is generally going to be after sunset to the first 1 or 2 hours after sunrise, generally till about 8 a.m. The thing is that most of us, because we work, we like to exercise either early in the morning or in the evening after work. So that, if you're going to exercise, that becomes a real downer because you can't run or cycle or play cricket or volleyball, basketball outdoors like you might. And the best times to exercise in those polluted seasons is actually in the middle of the day. Since a lot of us are working from home, I'm sure you could work out a quick, classic 30-minute run or a short exercise break or something, even a quick yoga workout during that time, and that would be much better for you. But it requires that awareness to say, oh, air pollution is bad during this time. It's a little bit better during this time of day. So let me see how I can adjust my personal schedule to
Yeah.
compensate for what's happening around.
So it will be a good habit to basically have such apps and basically monitor the environment that we are in, monitor the air quality levels, and then take such decisions.
Sure. Take a look at what's happening in Delhi. We are in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and Delhi earlier this year was doing quite poorly. And then, they got things under control. The COVID cases came down, and then the pollution season started. And now the number of coronavirus cases are back fourfold in some cases. It's a multifactorial thing. It's people are moving about more often. There's less social distancing. There's perhaps some complacency in following COVID restrictions, but certainly the worsening air pollution plays a role. So it's not just the things that we can't see. It's things that we know every day, like coronavirus, that are impacting us. So we do need to pay attention to this to protect our health, both for us and our loved ones.
So I read an article from the Harvard. So they were trying to give a relationship between the increase in number of coronavirus cases with the rising levels of air pollution.
Yes. And that's a well often quoted study from the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard University. And what they found basically was that even small increases in pollutants can lead to big jumps in coronavirus case positivity as well as mortality. And this is something that we often emphasize, is that it's not just the bad pollution that you get in Delhi. Even a moderate amount of pollution that you might get in Hyderabad or Mumbai or Chennai, and certainly Bangalore, where I am from, even these are harmful and needs to be paid attention to. Don't lull yourself into complacency because you don't live in the north. It's everywhere, and we all need to take care of
Yeah,
it.
Delhi kind of reaches to the severe levels of air quality.
Yes, yeah, it's a bit too extreme. It's a bit too extreme, unfortunately, for the 30 million people who live there.
Yeah, the government has been taking measures to manage the stubble burning issue. And I guess Delhi government was working with Pusa Institute, and they have developed this decomposer, which can be used instead of burning the stubble. You can just use the decomposer and decompose the stubble.
Right. So a lot of people are looking at different ways, and I really applaud that, because we need as many hands on deck as possible to solve this problem. As I said earlier, it's always going to start by reducing pollution at the source. But beyond that, we still need ways, especially in our rapidly urbanizing country. And once the coronavirus has passed, maybe another 1 or 2 years, we will see an increase in pollution again as the economy grows. And we need to be ready for that. We need to have measures in place, whether it's urban reforestry, better management of crop burning, accelerating phase out or replacement of old scrapped vehicles that are, say, more than 10 years old, for example, and don't meet current pollution norms. We can even take a page from the playbook of other countries where, for example, in certain cities in the UK, they've actually banned vehicles from certain parts of the city in during certain times of the days or certain times of the week to create a clean air zone. Others have even gone to the extent of banning diesel fuels because diesel is much more polluting than is normal petrol. So there's a lot of ways. I'm not advocating only one particular way, but there are many, many things that we can think about, put our heads together and come up with solutions to improve the quality of life for everybody.
Yeah, since we have a lot of people working to tackle the issue of air pollution, and also with the rise of electric
Mm-hmm.
vehicles and vehicles becoming a more commonplace technology and becoming more accessible to the Indian uh, community, the Indian market, I guess we will be able to manage the problem of air pollution in a much better way.
That's what we hope. That's what we hope. And along with that, we would hope to see, one of the things that's often unspoken about with air pollution is that it's also associated with climate change. Why? Because a large part of the contribution to air pollution is from burning of fossil fuels, right? If you think about whether it's generation of electricity from coal or diesel or oil, or whether it's the fuels that we use for our transportation and so forth, that emits a lot of carbon and other greenhouse gases that also accelerates the climate crisis that we're facing. So definitely these green solutions will help take a double-barrel approach to both air pollution as well as climate change at the same time.
Yeah, burning of fossil fuels not just contributes to air pollution, but it also contributes to other forms of pollution like soil, water.
Yes. And, I will tell you, I would be the happiest if I have fewer patients in my OPD because people are healthier and not having to come to the doctor as much. So I would love to see clean air for everyone.
So, sir, let's talk about the Pure Skies variant or the product that we can use at homes. Because I had this doubt because
Mhm.
Pure Skies uses the dry deposition, basically accelerates the dry deposition process. So, will I be seeing a layer of pollutants that have settled, and will I be seeing a layer of pollutants lying on the floor of my home or on the table or over other appliances and stuff?
Right. That's a great question. Yeah, one of the fortunate things about Pure Skies and the pulse radio technology that we use is that it's very size dependent. We can only affect particles that are about 20 to 30 microns in size, which are microscopic particles. So anything that's visible, we can't affect. And that's important because when this technology is on, you don't want, for example, a layer of dust on surfaces. If we're in a factory, you certainly wouldn't want dust to affect, say, your painting process or other industrial processes that you might have. That fortunately that doesn't happen because it is a very size dependent technology, or that rather the technology itself has a size dependent effect. That also means that it doesn't affect every single pollutant, right? We don't know about complex gases. We don't have enough data on that as of yet, although we're looking into that. But we do know it handles particle pollutants very well, PM10 and 2.5, as well as certain gases that often get involved as aerosols, which can then be affected by our technology. So you see modest declines in sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and a few others. But it's generally fine to use. It works just like your Wi-Fi. It doesn't interfere with your with your Wi-Fi because we use the same technology. Wi-Fi routers at home, they have these small receivers in them that scan your local area, and then they select the best channel within their range to use. And we do pretty much the same thing.
So we have phones connected to the network, and the phone is also connected to the Wi-Fi. So it's all in the same spectrum.
Yeah. Well, the technology is always evolving, and I'll tell you what we're really psyched about. Your mobile phone has a small Wi-Fi antenna. It's a small ceramic Wi-Fi antenna. That's how your hotspot works. And so while we're working on Pure Skies 2.0, we're also working or looking forward to Pure Skies 3.0, which is basically an app that you download onto your phone. You give it permission to use your phone's hotspot, and then it broadcasts the same pulse sequences as our big units. And so you have an air purifier in your pocket. And so that's something that we're really looking forward to coming out in the next couple of years.
That's really awesome technology. I really want everyone
Yeah.
to know about the Pure Skies product as well as what Pure Skies is working on, the Pure Skies 2.0, which uses cell phone Wi-Fi spectrum and cell phone hotspot to basically manage and tackle the air pollution. It would be really awesome. I'm really looking forward to see that technology.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking forward to science-based technologies that can have a huge impact on millions of people. And that's our goal.
So, finally, any message that you want to give to our listeners, anything that you want to convey to our listeners?
I would say just be aware, whatever it is that you're focused on, whether it's public health, environmental health, issues with refugees, whatever it is that interests you, just be aware and take action. Take loving action, take meaningful action, but try to focus on what you want to see, not on what you don't want. Focus on what you want to see, and that will make it happen. How did Pure Skies come about? Because I imagined a world with clean air for everyone, where I wouldn't have to worry about taxi drivers and shoe cobblers coming in with heart attacks. And that's how Pure Skies came about. And if you look at what you want to see and focus on that, then there's no telling what you can create for a better world.
So it's about contributing. So if you see a problem, you work on a solution to solve that
Yes.
problem.
Yes, but focus not on what you don't want, focus on what you want to see. Make it better. Yes. Yes.
Dr. Srikanth, thank you for joining in. This was a wonderful conversation and I've learned a lot from you. Also, I'm really psyched about the Pure Skies 2.0 product. And we would love to have a podcast with you again when 2.0 is available in the Indian market. Thanks a lot, sir. This was a wonderful conversation.
Sure, and thank you. I really enjoyed.